It started with a bullet and ended with millions of graves. World War I was a tragedy of epic proportions, a brutal conflict that shattered nations, changed the course of history, and left an indelible mark on our world. But how did we get here? In this video, we'll be exploring the complex web of events that led to the outbreak of this global conflict. So sit back and prepare to be transported back to the powder keg of early 20th century Europe as we delve into the roots of World War I. Join us as we uncover the tangled web of alliances, tensions, and events that culminated in one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. As always, here at Marey, we strive to bring you the best historical experiences through our videos. If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe so you never miss out on any of our thought-provoking content. Now let's turn back the clock and explore the road to World War I. Our story begins in the heart of Europe, where a young man named Gavrilo Princip made a fateful decision that would send shockwaves across the continent. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, along with his wife Sophie, was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Tensions were high as the region was a powder keg of ethnic and political unrest, and Ferdinand's presence was seen as a symbol of oppressive Habsburg rule by many local Serbs. Princip, a member of a secret society known as the Black Hand, saw an opportunity to strike a blow for Serbian independence. As the Archduke's motorcade drove past, he emerged from the crowd and fired a pistol at the vehicle. Both Ferdinand and his wife were fatally wounded, and they died shortly afterwards. News of the assassination spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of Europe within hours. The Austrians were outraged and prepared for action. They had long been eager to crack down on Serbia, which they held responsible for the growing nationalist movement in Bosnia. With the backing of their ally, Germany, the Austrians were ready to take drastic measures. On July 23, 1914, Austria delivered an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding a thorough investigation of the assassination and the punishment of those responsible. The Austrians also sought concessions from Serbia, including the right to station troops on Serbian soil and the dissolution of Serbian nationalist groups. Serbia accepted most of the demands, but refused to allow Austrian troops to enter its territory without prior consent. This rejection emboldened the Austrians, who saw it as a sign of weakness and a challenge to their authority. Meanwhile, the other European powers were closely monitoring the situation. France and Britain were tied to the Antwerp Cordial, while Russia had strong ties to Serbia. As the diplomatic crisis deepened, secret alliances began to stir, each nation preparing to defend their interests and protect their allies. Soon, the tinderbox of European politics was ablaze. The Austrians, emboldened by German support, declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. Within weeks, the entire continent was engulfed in a maelstrom of violence. As the Austrians marched into Serbia, Russian troops mobilized to defend their Slavic brethren. Germany, bound by their alliance with Austria, rallied behind their ally, sending troops to support the Austrian offensive. In a matter of weeks, Europe's intricate web of alliances had transformed a regional conflict into a full-blown world war. With the outbreak of hostilities, millions of men were mobilized and sent to the front lines. Trenches were dug, guns were fired, and the world watched in horror as the body count rose. But beyond the battlefield, the war had profound implications for the world. Raw materials were rationed, economies were strained, and societies were transformed. The home front became a battleground in itself as people grappled with the impact of the war on their daily lives. World War I was not just a clash of arms, it was a clash of ideologies, a struggle between empires and a fight for supremacy. As the war raged on, the fate of nations hung in the balance. Alliances shifted, strategies evolved, and the world held its breath. The conflict soon expanded beyond European borders, drawing in nations from across the globe. Colonial troops from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East joined the fray, turning the war into a truly global conflict. Among the most brutal theaters of war was the Eastern Front, where Russian and German forces clashed in a deadly dance of attrition. Vast armies engaged in sweeping maneuvers, fought over strategic regions such as Poland and the Baltic states. The Eastern Front was marked by immense casualties and brutal battles that tested the limits of human endurance. The Western Front, primarily fought in France and Belgium, was characterized by a stalemate between British, French, and German forces. A network of trenches stretched for hundreds of miles, forming a grim landscape of mud, blood, and misery. Battles like Verdun and the Somme became synonymous with death and destruction as soldiers on both sides suffered staggering losses for just meters of land. But the horrors of World War I were not confined to the battlefields alone. The war at sea was equally intense, with navies from the warring powers engaged in a deadly struggle for dominance. The sinking of the Lusitania, a British passenger liner by a German U-boat in 1915, was a pivotal moment that shocked the world. The loss of civilian lives, including Americans, intensified public opinion against Germany and highlighted the brutality of modern warfare. As the war dragged on, new weapons and technologies were introduced, forever changing the face of warfare. Tanks rumbled across battlefields, breaking through enemy lines. Airplanes soared overhead, raining bombs on distant targets, and poisonous gases filled the trenches, leaving soldiers blinded and gasping for breath. Amidst the chaos and carnage, individuals displayed remarkable acts of bravery, compassion, and resilience. Ordinary people turned heroes. Nurses, doctors, and volunteers provided aid and comfort to the wounded and dying. Civilians on the home front rallied together to support the war effort, conserving resources, producing supplies, and raising funds. Stories of heroism and selflessness emerged from the darkest days of World War I, reminding us of the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the midst of this global conflict, the United States played an increasingly prominent role. Initially, the U.S. government pursued a policy of neutrality, urging Americans to remain nonpartisan in the conflict. However, as the war intensified, American interest and involvement grew. The sinking of American merchant ships by German U-boats, coupled with the Zimmermann telegram, a secret German proposal to Mexico to join the war against the U.S., turned public opinion in favor of intervention. In April 1917, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany, marking a significant shift in the global conflict. The entry of the U.S. into World War I brought a surge of fresh troops and resources to the Allied forces, bolstering their capabilities and morale. American participation tipped the balance of power and contributed to the eventual Allied victory. As the war reached its climax, the fighting became even more intense and widespread. By 1918, the exhausted European powers were locked in a desperate struggle for supremacy. The final German offensive, aimed at breaking through the Western Front, failed to achieve its objectives, marking a turning point in the conflict. Allied forces, bolstered by American reinforcements, pushed back the Germans, capturing vital territories and inflicting heavy casualties. The collapse of empires was a defining feature of the war. The Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and German empires all crumbled, giving rise to new nations and redrawing the map of Europe and the Middle East. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns fell silent as the warring powers signed an armistice, bringing an end to the conflict. The terms of the armistice included the withdrawal of German troops from occupied territories, the disarmament of the German military, and restrictions on Germany's future military capabilities. The end of hostilities raised hopes for a lasting peace, but the path to reconciliation was fraught with challenges. The Paris Peace Conference convened in 1919 to address the terms of peace and the future of Europe. The conference was attended by representatives from the victorious powers, including the United States, Britain, France, and Italy, among others. However, the negotiations were contentious, as the Allies had differing visions for the post-war world. President Woodrow Wilson of the United States championed his 14 points, a set of principles aimed at establishing a lasting peace, including the creation of the League of Nations, a body designed to prevent future wars. Despite Wilson's efforts, the peace conference descended into a battle of national interests. France and Britain, seeking revenge and security, pushed for harsh terms for Germany, while the U.S. and Italy had different objectives. Ultimately, the conference resulted in a series of treaties, including the Treaty of Versailles, which formally ended the war between Germany and the Allied powers. The terms of the treaty were highly controversial and placed sole blame on Germany for the war, imposing heavy reparations, territorial losses, and military restrictions on the defeated nation. As the dust settled and peace treaties were signed, the world grappled with the staggering consequences of the war. Over 17 million people had perished, leaving families shattered and nations devastated. The economic and social fabric of Europe was torn apart, with entire industries crippled by the conflict. In the aftermath of the war, empires that had stood for centuries collapsed, giving way to new nations and shifting the balance of power. The Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, and Russian empires ceased to exist, replaced by numerous successor states. One of the most significant outcomes of World War I was the emergence of new ideologies and political movements. The war's devastating impact on traditional power structures and the failure of the old order to prevent such a catastrophic conflict led to disillusionment and a search for new ways of organizing society. Among the most prominent was the rise of communism, championed by Vladimir Lenin in Russia, which overthrew the monarchy and established the first communist state. Furthermore, the war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield and political landscape. It left an indelible mark on literature, art, and culture, giving rise to a lost generation of writers and artists who captured the disillusionment and trauma of a war-torn world. Writers like Ernest Hemingway and poets like Wilfred Owen immortalized the horrors of war in their works, influencing generations of artists to come. So there you have it, the journey through the road to World War I, a conflict that reshaped the world and left an enduring legacy on human history. What are your thoughts on the events leading up to World War I? Do you believe the conflict could have been avoided? Or were the rival alliances and simmering tensions simply too great to overcome? Share your insights in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this pivotal moment in history. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical journeys. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Merrill's Journey Through History. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember the past is never truly past.